Welcome to our Welcome to our PolyCast. Today I have here Anna Bandura. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And today we are going to talk about your journey as a polyglot.
That's why PolyCast.
That's why PolyCast, exactly.
Wow, that makes sense.
So creative, right?
It is. Before I was Googling. I was like, what does PolyCast mean? Did I miss something? Because I miss this type of stuff all the time.
Okay.
But it's just, then I was like, I'll just ask you.
Yeah, no, don't worry. There's no meme that you missed out on or something. It's just me trying to find a name or a combination of polyglot and podcast. But yeah, no, but it's an honor to have you as my first guest.
Thank you for inviting me. Yes. At first I was like, wow, that's so cool. I was like, instantly after I read this message, it somehow disappeared first. And I was like, okay, now it's interesting.
Yeah, I thought you ghosted me actually.
That's what I do. No, I'm so bad with LinkedIn messages because I get so much spam.
Oh yeah.
Essentially also from science people who are like, hey, try this new product.
Really?
Yeah, they do this a lot.
Oh,
like once you have science in your bio, they're instantly like, texting you. So I usually have about 15 unread messages just from those people, and this is like sometimes you're just like, okay, this is
I think that's a basic problem. LinkedIn,
I also think so,
it's switched from a messaging app or a connection app to a spam app, right?
It is.
It's even worse than emails, I think, already, right?
Yeah, because it's harder to get your email than to get your LinkedIn. So yeah. I hope you were not too sad.
No,
I ghosted you.
No. I was really happy, and I actually thought that you might miss the message. Like this is how I estimated you as a person.
Yes, I would never ghost on purpose.
No,
I would say always sounded a mistake.
No, but it's really nice. I must say you really inspired me actually to do this podcast because I find it always so great when people tell me that they know 4 languages or more, and I always just think like, how do you manage to do it? And find it super interesting to hear the stories and also definitely the techniques, how you can remember those. But yeah, maybe you can just introduce yourself once more, and also tell me a bit about your background in general, and then we can go more into the language learning thing.
I think also with my name, Anna, it is quite international. So I'm really grateful to my parents that they chose Anna and nothing that is very specific. So I also like Nina. I think it's also quite international. Once it has 2 syllables, it's automatically super easy to pronounce. Even in Chinese, they have like Anna, and that's it. You can have it as a name, and I'm just so grateful for that, for having this. And what I do, I'm a scientist. I'm a molecular biologist, but I'm currently working in the field of stem cells.
Okay.
So we're doing this cool future stuff, you could think.
Nice.
And I don't really use languages that much in my daily work.
Oh yeah.
I can imagine.
I can imagine though.
So,
it's so in what language do you then usually work?
English.
Ah yeah?
English.
Okay.
English is definitely the language of science in the 21st century. For sure. It is so awkward to do a presentation in German for me now.
Okay.
So every time we had a presentation where we had to talk to some German speakers, it was so awkward. Half of it was just Denglish. You just do not have the same fluency when speaking about science in German. And it's the same for everyone. Yeah. Everyone who I talked to from science, everyone's like, yep, agreed. German definitely shifts to your second place. Okay.
But how is it then at the institute? Is it mostly international people, or why is it then English? Or would it, like, even if everyone would be German speaking, it would still be English?
This is a good question. So in general, even between German speakers in our lab, we speak English. Just because sometimes we try to do this in German and then we just lack the words for this. So it's for the science-specific things, but we are an international institute, to come back to your question, and English is an official language that we use, and it is, I would even say it is imposed on us to speak English to accommodate the international community German.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting though, because I think it's still very region specific, since I have a friend, she currently does her PhD in Sicily, and she's a biochemist, and she says she has the hardest time actually because everyone is only speaking not even Italian but Sicilian.
Oh wow!
I mean, definitely for the scientific terms, they don't have Sicilian terms for science, but nevertheless, it's all in Italian. It's so crazy, right?
That is then really maybe a difference, and also could be a institute culture difference. So maybe it is really important what is conveyed by management, by administration, because when people start at our institute, also when they start as a PhD there, everything is in English, and I know that people are sometimes explicitly told, yeah, we are an English-speaking institute. We are here to make everyone feel welcome. This is an important thing. I guess this is then the issue with some other institutes where they do not maybe do it not proactively enough. Yeah. Because, of course, you would revert to German if the majority is German-speaking.
Definitely, yeah. Okay.
We are just English speaking. For some reason, this is why sometimes speaking German now for me is like a foreign language more than English.
Really, yeah. That's interesting. But how is like your journey in general? Like maybe you can tell me like what languages you know, how you got to learn them.
So I come from a Russian-speaking household. So that means that I grew up with Russian as my first language. It is my primary language. For sure, it's a language that I speak in my family, that I speak with my parents, my grandparents, with some friends, even here in Vienna. So Russian definitely has an important spot in my life. Yeah. Also, Russian memes are...
Oh, really?
Yes. I would be so sad if I would be missing out on that part of culture.
Really?
The humor is, I think, a bit different, but still they are... Yeah.
In what sense is it different?
I think it's just other cultural things that are important. Also, since I'm still obviously monitoring the political situation that's going on in Russia, and some things you cannot take without a little bit of humor. So of course,
that's
you have,
true. That helps.
Exactly. So important to kind of stay sane. So that you just laugh about certain things that are going on. Within like the corruption that is going on there are just a lot of memes about that as well. Yeah.
Okay, I can understand. Okay. So Russian.
Russian is my primary language. I have never had to learn it, so I'm very glad.
Yeah. I heard that it has 6 cases instead of 4.
Cases.
So
it has 6 cases. Yeah. I mean, Latin also has 5.5. But yeah, I think it's really great that I speak Russian, even though some people assume that if you speak Russian, then you automatically understand some Eastern European languages.
It depends, but like Slavic.
Slavic Eastern European languages.
Yeah.
This is actually not the case, because Russian is quite far away linguistically from for instance, the Slovakian or Czech, or Polish. They're quite far. So these languages are much closer to Ukrainian, for instance. So people who speak Ukrainian, they understand much better the Polish speakers and Czech speakers.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think I've never looked at this tree. There was definitely some sort of language tree, which language originated from what. But these languages are much closer than Russian is. So for instance, I do understand some words. Definitely, but
like the context you maybe can get, or not even that.
I wouldn't say so.
Really?
Okay. I can understand some words. If I know the context, I might understand what people are talking about. But if you would put me into a conversation with some Polish-speaking people, probably no chance.
Yeah. Polish is also really, really tough, especially the pronunciation.
Yeah.
And I just heard that it's a very, very tough. But it still surprises me that you say this actually, because this is one thing that everyone always told me. Like, you would have it much easier. At least maybe you would have it easier to learn.
This I can agree with. Yeah.
Okay.
We will have it easier to learn, since definitely the roots of the language are the same. Yeah. Definitely, it is a Slavic language. It has. I never tried to learn any other Slavic language, honestly, so I cannot really judge how it is. But you do not get the automatic access to understanding, in my opinion, get with the Roman languages. If you speak French, you get really a much easier access to Italian. Italian, you are understanding Spanish. You're probably not going to be able to speak it right away, but understand it for sure. So I guess this kind of, that's how I can come over to the languages that I speak as well. So I did start as my...
Well, German, you know?
With German, yes, I do know German. Yes, I forget about it sometimes. So it was my language when growing up, even though it did not come from the family. So I grew up in Vienna in a German-speaking environment. So I went to a German-speaking kindergarten, and I had this immersion into the culture and the language, but I never spoke it at home. So, for instance, sometimes it's super weird when you ask me about some household items, I sometimes will not be able to tell you them in German. I know them in Russian, but not in German.
Honestly, I can so much relate to this. I think most of us that learn English, right, and even maybe only have it the same case as it was for you for German. I went on my exchange to somewhere, and I wanted to like name specific objects at home, and I was just like, what is this? Like, I have never learned.
I don't learn it. So you would never. You also don't ask yourself, how would I call this and that before you are really in that setting.
Exactly.
This is why really to be immersed in a culture is so important, that you really spend some time in the language speaking environment. Yes. So it was very interesting with my first German speaking boyfriend. I came to his place and we were all together cooking something, and his mom asked me to get her something. I don't remember which kitchen item it was, but I was like, what is that? And I was like speaking German perfectly before that, and she was like, you don't know that? I'm like, no, I never heard of it.
No, but definitely interesting. It's really and shows how important the context always is, kind of like in what you learn the language, or where you learn the language, what is important then in that situation.
If you learn language for business, it's a completely different thing than if you learn it for your free time traveling.
Or English for science.
English for science. Yeah, English was not my favorite subject in school.
But it's really good. So
you
learn it somewhere else, probably more.
I think when we transitioned from middle school to high school, we had some language assistants coming in. So we had a person coming to us from Oxford.
Oh.
And I think that really inspired me. Back then she was so British, and I was obsessed. I wanted to study in Oxford, and I was like, a real person from Oxford is here, and I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Yeah, so...
Is it at a school here?
Yes, a school here. In Moscow, I was only there for my primary school and for parts of the middle school, school. So I had a uninterrupted school journey here from middle of the middle school until the end of high school.
Okay.
So I had the most language learning actually happened here in high school. Yes. So I went to the Akademisches Gymnasium, which is a language school. So it is a school that particularly offers a lot of language in it. And at that time where I started there, I absolutely hated French.
Okay.
I despised the language because my parents tried to teach me French as a kid. When I was about 8 years old, I actually had a great teacher. So she was super fun. She was always trying to give me some exercises to make it, less of a strain to learn a language. But I think since I was 8 years old, I was not appreciating at all.
Okay.
And I was just tired by the end of the day, and I just did not want to do another thing.
Yeah.
It's really hard to remember now, to get in my 8-year-old head. I don't know what was driving me back then. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I just wanted to watch cartoons. But it was a fun teacher, She was not boring. She was not trying to study things.
Yeah.
She was kind of more engaging. But for some reason, I just hated it. I was hiding under the table when she was coming. These things were just...
That's funny.
It is very cute, yeah. I mean,
she should have put on maybe some French cartoon. Maybe you would have come out on a table.
She tried. She even had a great computer game. with some, for learning some French, and I really liked it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I cannot explain it. My parents cannot explain it either. They're just like, every time the teacher came, you just hid under the table. Okay. Maybe there was something going on.
Maybe. You weren't ready yet.
Maybe not. And then actually when we came to Vienna and I was 13 years old and I started learning French, I was like, wow, that is actually quite cool. And the thing was that I had to almost 1 year of French. So when I came here, people in my school were already learning French for 1.5 years. So that means that I had to just catch up.
Yeah.
And I did catch up somehow. I just took the books that they used and just in my summer holidays, I just read through them and I just memorized them.
Wow.
I don't know what was driving me back then, honestly. As a 13-year-old, maybe it was, I don't know, I was a bit stressed from moving countries and I kind of tried to...
Yeah. I understand.
Learn, I don't know. I really cannot explain it. I think it's not a very conventional way to start learning a language.
Okay, so you kind of started and you kind of nerded into it because you liked it.
I think I had some pressure that I had to catch up. I had a bit of a jump start into the language. It was for two languages, for French and for Latin. Because for French, my classmates were 1.5 years ahead of me, and for Latin, just a half a year ahead. But for Latin, I had to take a tutor back then, just really to explain everything, the structure. Yeah. But I was, at that time, I was really a bit of a nerd. So I would stay really long hours just studying words. And for me, it was just so satisfying. Yes.
Really?
It's not cool. Not normal for a 13-year-old to do that. But it is, I just found it very satisfying to really know then the words at the end of the day, and remembering them and kind of, or watching something, you watch something and then should not always be in French, but you still have quite a few French words in English, right? Or in German sometimes it's this thing where you're like, wow, that makes sense.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I
know those moments. Yeah.
Those moments. And I think I was just a bit of a junkie for those moments back then. So I was like, okay, if I learn a lot of words, I'll have more of these moments.
That's so funny. Okay.
Yes.
It was kind of your dopamine kick.
I think it was. Honestly, I think at some point I was addicted to like learning words, learning vocabulary.
But do you do this then for, like, do you do it still, or...
No, I don't
for other languages? Because there's probably also other languages where those like moments would appear, or where you find other languages in your language, or I don't know.
I think not. I mean, how I went on further, I started learning Italian. So, and there I think I had just more connections to French. So it's a bit of a snowball effect. You learn one language, which is related, right? So I started with French and Latin, and then Italian was so much easier after this. And then you start relating to the words that you learned before in French and Latin, and you're just like, wow.
Everything makes sense,
everything
right?
Makes
it's like
sense.
A puzzle.
It is a puzzle, and I think I was living for those moments. When I was learning languages, I'm also not learning languages actively now. So I do learn Chinese right now, but it's not as I did it in high school. So I had to come back to my high school experience. Really, the school was fostering the language learning.
Okay.
So everyone was learning languages. Everyone spoke English, German. Everyone spoke much better English than I did back then. I came from Russia, where languages are taught very well on the grammar level, I think, but the speaking is a bit neglected all the time. And in Europe, or I can speak for Austria, it is, in my school at least, we had maybe a good teacher, and she was more about the speaking. So I found the topics that we spoke about quite boring, I must say, but still kind of try to focus on the speaking. And so speaking first, grammar second.
Really?
That's how the approach in my school was.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so...
Interesting.
And in my Russian school, it was grammar first, everything else in the back. So I came here, my English was not bad, and it was not terrible, but it was not as good and not as fluent as the one of people here. And also I think in general the exposure in Europe that you have to the English language, you can go to the movies and see this movie in original language, which is usually English. It is
definitely. Yeah, there's a lot more being internationalized. That's true.
I feel like sometimes even if you just walk through the city, you have more ads in English.
Oh, really?
Here, sometimes you have stuff going on in English. Even here, if you just try and look, don't have an example right now, but I just have always had the feeling that you would see some English words maybe, Also, it is quite obvious with the different alphabets that we have in Russian and English that you would not integrate English words into a Russian sentence.
Yeah.
But you can as well do that in German.
Yeah, that's true. So you're right, yeah.
So you definitely have a much lower barrier for English here. And I think now with social media, it's such a strong exposure to English
that's true.
That kids have.
Yeah.
My 15-year-old sister, her English is probably as good as mine already.
Really?
Yes, I'm pretty sure. She's quite talented in general, I would say, but her exposure to TikTok, we can talk about the benefits of TikTok, but her English definitely is much more live and active, and I think it's just super cool to have that.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. And I think like also with Netflix, you can just so easily switch. Yeah. And back then, I mean, when we grew up, like we were watching TV.
We grew up
back then. But it's already like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think especially in the last years, a lot of media consumption, it changed a lot.
Definitely.
It's so different. No one uses a TV anymore. No. Back then it was the main medium you used after work when you wanted to relax after dinner or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, but how is it then? So now you know Russian, you know German, you know French, and what is with Italian?
Italian, I think I'm quite fluent if we would have a day-to-day conversation.
Okay.
With you. So I would not be able to talk about politics or science in Italian. So, but we can, I think, have quite an interesting conversation.
Yeah, what would you do when you don't know the words, for instance? Or does it happen to you, actually?
It does, of course. In German, this is the most sad, like the saddest part. Today, I did not remember the German word, or any word actually, for cabbage. I tried to explain to my coworkers what I made last night for dinner, and I made a stir-fried cabbage inside, and I was like straight there standing like this for maybe 1 minute.
Yeah.
Like, what is this word? And then I just started explaining it, just using other words.
Okay.
And
using other words. Okay. Yeah, because maybe I'm going a bit more into the detail now, but I think when you said speaking is really important, I think like you always notice how many words you're still missing when you start speaking.
Yes, that's true.
And I think it's always very hard and that's why many people are afraid of it, because they might stumble, right? Because this happens when you don't know the word and you stumble.
It's true.
But yeah, so what would you advise if you like to go about this and to like this fear of not knowing and maybe making mistakes or something?
It is something I can still relate to a lot. So if we had an Italian speaker, native speaker here in the room, and we were to switch now to Italian, I would be a little bit scared.
Yeah.
I would have this a bit of a like, okay, a bit of this moment of adjustment. So yeah, I think in general, let's start from the moment where you start learning a language. When you start learning a language, you can choose the way you start doing it. And I think if you just have the option of starting to talk to a native speaker straight away, do it. Like, for instance, italki, if you know the platform, it is there you can find teachers, I would even say for every type of budget.
Yeah.
Especially if you are looking for such languages as Spanish. There are a lot of people offering you to teach Spanish. And then you can find really any price range. You can find lessons from €5 per hour.
Really?
And does not mean that those people are probably not going to be very good at teaching the language, but they can for sure speak with you. And I would really start with speaking if you can do that. Yeah, it is.
I mean, okay. No, that's really, really interesting. And it's because since we are doing Palais, right? And this is something that we wanted to basically digitize. So the speaking practice, that you could find someone to talk to like this, right? But I always thought that it's more a solution for intermediate learners or advanced learners. I thought, okay, you could use it as a beginner, but you need a lot of guidance at the beginning. But still, you're saying it would be the right approach to start with speaking.
Yeah, I would do that. I would try maybe a bit of an experimental approach, because I never really did it like that myself.
Yeah, okay.
Because I was, as I said, like all the languages that I learned at school. So obviously I had this very academic approach to it. All my language learning started in a very organized way. I had a very interesting experience with my boyfriend recently, who started learning Arabic.
Okay.
Just for fun. He was like, yeah, why not? He did a couple of weeks on Duolingo. So he knew the very, very basics, like really how to like read and everything. And then he had those first lessons with his Arabic teacher, who was not a teacher really. He was just speaking with him, I think. And he said that he made so much progress in those first lessons, even though he had and also I think that if you start with this, if you start speaking the language before you have actually already invested a lot of time, you also don't really have an expectation that, oh, by now I've learned the language for half a year, I should be able to say this and that. Kind of know this, I'm shit, and I know this. Like, I know that I do not know anything. I will just, whatever I have already learned, I will just start practicing it immediately. So I think this might work. I just have one positive example of this working. When I tried myself now, with Mandarin. So I really want to, once I have a bit more time, I want to find a teacher and be like, okay, let's just speak. I do not know that many characters. I know maybe like 200 characters.
Okay.
That's not much, but let's just start.
And so this would be your approach, because this was something I wanted to ask you. Like, when you learn a language, the next language you're learning, is it how it's going to be? It's speaking first.
Yes, I want to try that.
Okay.
I want to still gather a little bit of basics. I think you can just easily do this with YouTube or Duolingo or other language learning app that has a bit of structure.
Yeah. And what basics are you talking about?
Basics. That is a good question. So I think that would be really basic vocabulary. Okay. Just a really, really basic vocabulary. Then some basic grammar, as in you just want to know what the structure of the language is. So for instance, you want to know if you need to conjugate the verbs, or you don't need to do that. You know, as in Chinese, for instance, you don't have to do that. You just use the verb in its
about Mandarin, actually.
That's true, but it's the thing where you're kind of lured into Mandarin, you know, they tell you, you don't have to do any cases, you don't have to do any conjugations, and then the characters come. You're like, well, but to come back to the basics, the very basic grammar is more really to understand the language structure. I think this is something that an adult language learner can do, you know, because if you probably, as an adult, you should know at least one language that you speak, and you probably already had some grammar at school for your own language. And there you will be able to kind of relate a bit more to the new language, because more of this just structural approach to language learning, where you just want to understand how it is, how it's built. That's something that kids do not do. Like if you give a kid a new language, they will start learning it completely different. I'm just more talking about like the adult approach.
Yeah, definitely.
And the more languages you have learned, the easier it gets. You know what to look at.
Like there's also the saying, when you learn languages as a child, it's much easier than for adults. Actually, would you agree to that? Or
yes, 100%.
Really,
I'm struggling. Help! Send help! Give me my 13-year-old brain back.
Yeah,
for sure, definitely.
Okay.
Not that I'm completely struggling right now with Mandarin, but I just find it so much harder to memorize things. I don't know how you feel about memorizing things in general.
Yeah, well, I think memorizing them first is easy, but the long-term memory, that's the problem for me, honestly.
Yeah, I think same here.
Yeah.
And also sometimes I just have a lot of reels popping up actually in my Instagram feed about how do you call this thing in French? And then, you know, there are some absolutely weird words.
Yeah.
Like, I don't remember them anymore.
Yeah,
I watched it a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
I remembered it until the evening, and now it's gone.
Okay.
Like probably if I would, you know, see the images again, maybe it will come back.
Maybe. Yeah. And but how is it then? So you said that you don't have so much exposure to the other languages that you learned. But for instance, when we got to know each other, right? There was this guy, like we were in a conversation. He was from Paris. We started in French, and you just started speaking, and it was so fluent without any mistakes, and like used very advanced vocabulary. So it didn't seem like you were like your French was rusty at all.
But I was even more impressed when you just out of the blue also started speaking in French. And it was just like a snowball where everyone's like, and then someone else I think joined the conversation, but they were not speaking French, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. So, yes. Then we had to stop.
Yes,
but how do you remember then, like, and also most importantly, like how do you remember and how do you not confuse with other languages, especially if you also know Italian?
Okay, so I'll just start with the first thing. How do you remember? I think I remember a very solid baseline of French, and which, since I had this very intense period of time where I was learning French, I think I spent 6 years really intensely learning French. I had French in school. I had French in. I went to some evening courses in French at the French Institute here in Vienna. And then I was also preparing to do a language certificate for the C1 level. So you can imagine it is really a lot of it. And I think there is just, the more you learn, the more is this chunk of language knowledge that you will never forget.
Yeah.
I'm definitely less fluent than I was when I did my language certificate, which was by now 8 years ago. I still did a kind of a refreshment of this, and I'm still level C1 in French, but it doesn't feel like it. So that's why I said what I had before. I knew I was much more fluent. I knew I had definitely a bigger palette, bigger choice of words. But it's just, the more you learn, the will retain of the baseline. That is really my baseline. Like I'm pretty sure I will not fall below that one. So I'm pretty sure I will not forget French completely, unless I have some neurological disorder, I assume. Really, no, I really think that I will not forget, because I have not practiced it for years at some point, and then I just started speaking again. And there is this baseline, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
And so do you think that you would always have to sacrifice something?
Unless you practice.
Unless you
practice, yes.
Okay.
And practice can be very different. You can watch movies and read books, but this is still passive. You need to actively speak it, so it doesn't get lost. For instance, my siblings, they are going to the French school in Vienna, so I practice my French with them. But as you can imagine, what I'm talking to a 9-year-old and a 15-year-old about are not necessarily very elaborate topics all the time. It's more of this day-to-day conversational language.
Yeah.
But yeah, just
you need to speak it to remember.
You need to speak it. This is definitely, I would not argue with that at all. So you do need to speak it to remember.
No, it's a very good point. I did some research on like, I don't know, a few months ago on like the most effective methods to learn languages, and so often, and even myself, like I was always kind of like a bit disappointed when I started to speak a language or practice or with real natives, because I stumbled so much, and I was really not fluent, and I was just thinking, hey, I was studying a lot, or I was using language every day, I was watching the movies, but as you said, it's only passive, right? Yeah.
And it's very easy to fall into that trap where you understand a lot. So for instance, now I could watch, maybe with subtitles, but I could watch a French movie, with French subtitles, and I would understand 95%.
They speak so fast.
They do, exactly, yes. Everyone needs, I'm pretty sure even French people need them, they will just never say it. They're like,
they would never say
never. They'd be like, oh no, je comprends. But actively speaking is really the thing. And it, as we talked already today, it is scary.
Yeah.
And it will be scary.
Yeah. But you said like you need active practice, and that needs time, right? And you only can do so many things in a life, right? But still, like when you think about it, that you like moved back to your baseline, how do you feel about that, or what do you think about this?
I think in general, I would not say that I'm disappointed or anything. Does not really feel like I've lost something, even though I have. Like if you think about it very pragmatically, I definitely have lost a certain percentage of my vocabulary. I'm pretty sure I have not lost any of my grammar though, but vocabulary, I definitely have lost that. But what keeps me a bit more optimistic is that I know that if I were to land in a French-speaking environment, I would again acquire all that missing vocabulary, because again I have this baseline that it allows me to communicate clearly with people. I would just probably not going to be using very elaborate words to say things.
Would you compare it actually to, like, for instance, skiing or something? Because as soon as you know skiing, then you will always be able to ski again. Definitely. You just need a bit of time to...
Yeah, for sure. I don't know how to ski actually. I do snowboard, but it's, I think, probably very similar. And I know now that I also have a very baseline level of snowboarding. I could do crazy tricks again, but then on the other hand, I'm like, I don't want to die.
Okay, and what I also asked you before is, how can you not confuse the languages? For instance, in Italian and French, it's so close, and maybe.
Yeah, I think I never had that problem, that I confused languages. It is more of a problem when you are really good at some languages. For instance, I would say that I'm really good at Russian, German, and English. So these are my top 3 languages where I'm 100% confident that I could have any type of conversation. And what happens there is you just start speaking a mix of these. This is something where you sometimes just do straight ahead remember a word in Russian. What the language that I speak to my boyfriend, it's a complete mix of Russian and English, just because we're both in the scientific field and we speak English all day. But once I go to my parents' place, I really have to force myself to speak in proper Russian. And then I really have it sometimes that I need to remember how I say this and that in Russian, for instance. For instance, there's just word handling something in English, right? Yeah, we just need to think of how we are going to handle that situation.
Yeah, you're so right.
And then you're like,
this doesn't exist in German, for instance.
Exactly.
As well.
And also
the same moment.
Yeah, and it does not exist in Russian either.
Okay.
And so I just go to saying it in a Russian manner. I say "захемдлить," And if I say it with my parents, they're like, "You good? You're having a stroke there? Like you're alright?" Like, they just don't get it. And then I'm like, trying to explain it in other words. So you definitely know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I definitely know what you mean. But definitely, I have the same thing. And same thing with English and German. Why do you think is that the case? So that you, as soon as you have this really good level, why do you think?
It's a very good question, actually. Yeah, I think one explanation could be that, as we said before, some words are just more convenient in the other languages.
Yeah.
For instance, in Russian, we don't have the German word termin, like the word appointment. Okay. We don't have it. So any Russian speaker would say the word termin integrated into the Russian language. Like, I have a termin there and there. I think it's just, first is this thing where you have just words that are not overlapping and are more comfortable in one language. The more of this kind of philosophical question, why does this happen? I don't know. Maybe it is actually the moment where our brain is overloaded. So it would be interesting to, read up on that from a neuropsychological point of view, or to see if that is something that could be, because things like these languages, there's 3 languages for me, they just live there really on equal rights. And sometimes the brain just probably picks the first word that is most available, because they're all kind of, if you would imagine it, you have 3 different trays, with things lying on them. Yeah. And they're all as close to the person who's reaching for them. Yeah. And that really your brain just reaches for the one that is currently a little bit closer, the one is currently more available. Yeah. Because they're, for instance, French, if we go again for those trays, like if it's like German, English, Russian, then French would be further away, and my brain would never think about reaching that far for a language. But they're all the same. That
makes sense.
That was just an assumption, so I don't know how it works. I'm 100% sure there is a neurological explanation for this, but this is something that I would just assume.
I find it super interesting. There's kind of this like rumor that you get a different personality.
It's not a rumor.
It's not a rumor.
It's true.
Really? Yes. Okay, so what is your personality? How is the difference in the languages? English is for sure like the intelligent scientist.
Yes, it is for sure that kind of more also science communicator, explaining things. I just really love things. Yeah, let's imagine we have this and that. I don't know. I mean, you spoke to me today in German and in English. Did you notice any differences?
That's a really good question. I cannot recall now, but I don't know you enough.
That's true. Because we met like once for 1 hour.
Exactly.
That is true.
Yeah. But I always know it, or maybe I notice it when you spend some time with your friends or your best friends actually, and then suddenly they speak in a language that you're not used.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
That they speak it. Like for instance, English. I mean, I talk with my best friends from Vienna in German. Yeah. And then sometimes when they start in English, I'm like, who are you? Like, I don't like, exactly. Even the voice is different.
Voice
is like
different, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's but I think it's actually more because they're not used to speaking so much in English or in that language. They're lacking a bit of maybe calm and also authenticity, maybe because maybe it's that, or
could be.
Yeah.
Also, if you're only consuming media in English, but you're not actively speaking it with real people, it could also be that it just kind of rubs off on you. For example of my sister, maybe she watches a lot of those TikToks, and she started talking like, they're doing this and that. Should we like go out for Starbucks? And she started talking like that.
Yeah.
Even she has absolutely no environment that would cause that.
Yeah.
It could be, of course, that one language is just not as fluent, and this is why the personality is different. But what I can say for sure is that my Russian personality is different. Like the English one is the most bubbly, this kind of stuff. German is a bit more reserved, and Russian, I'm just like, have a poker face usually.
Really?
Yes. I don't know why.
That's funny.
Yeah, I'm just much more serious when I speak Russian. No, I don't know what it is.
I mean, I think Russian sounds already much more serious.
It is like, you're not joking about it.
Yeah.
You're just like really...
Like German a bit as well, right?
First, to some people, yeah. This is why also I think coming from like English is definitely the most easygoing for me. And then comes German, and then Russian. I think this easygoingness is a word.
That's interesting.
Yeah. But you also, like, I was just also trying to remember, you kind of switch personalities from German to English.
Yeah, I think I have a different personality in English.
How is it?
Also.
What's English mean?
I feel like more chilled.
More chilled, really?
Yeah.
It has something to do with in which context we learn the language.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I feel like also by now, sometimes I feel like I can express myself better in English sometimes than German. Yeah. And with friends, like there's this quote, like if you would know me in German, in my mother tongue, you would know like basically how funny I can be.
I don't know what
and that's what I had a bit with my French. Like I felt like actually that it doesn't unlock my personality 100% because it was still lacking kind of the communication ability in some kind of way. So maybe I would not say I felt stupid, but I felt like kind of blocked. So maybe two last questions, which is first, I mean, you already told me maybe some, but maybe you have one left. Do you have kind of like a fun language-related story or something?
There are a lot of them. I must say, it's just that I always forget them.
Okay, I know that.
Yeah.
If someone asks me, do you have a fun story to tell? Or what is your favorite thing? You're like, I don't have any favorite things. My life is boring. I have no fun stories whatsoever.
Instant blackout.
Yeah.
Or like this. Tell me. You're like,
yeah.
What
kind of person are you?
Yeah,
describe your character.
Boring. Yeah. More a general thing is I find it very funny when people don't know you speak the language, and then they start speaking it like next to you. It happened to me a couple of times. It was funny afterwards, but it was Russian speakers, unfortunately. They started discussing, I think, my outfit or something like that. I was on my way to a party, so on a Saturday evening, so I was dressed, it was summer, so I was just dressed like I would normally not be dressed on a day. So, but I don't think it was too much, but still, people kind of started to discuss my makeup and everything. They're like, and I found it, I was just sitting there kind of waiting for them to have the good time, the good conversation, the gossip session they were having. And then, when I stood up and left the metro, I was wishing them a great day in Russian, and just their facial expressions, they were priceless.
Wow.
It was, I don't know.
I would really like to see a picture.
I know, right? It's like that. But I would not classify that maybe as too funny, but this is something in general that you just, I love eavesdropping, like eavesdropping, when you're sometimes just listening to what people are talking about, and you're like, is it? What is it?
Yeah, that's so nice, right?
Especially in French. So I think it's in general this kind of funny encounters that you have.
Yeah.
And a lot of embarrassing stories, of course, that I probably will not be remembering all of them now, but maybe for the next time.
For the next time. Okay, and last question, what is then your favorite language? Or maybe you can have it also for different contexts, but what is it like that you enjoy the most?
I think with languages, it's very easy to fall into the trap of liking the language that is easiest to speak. For now, it's English for me, definitely. It's so easy for me to converse in English in any types of situations. So I would really say that my favorite language now is English, because it also can be very different. You can go from this very superficial, simple conversation that you can have to really a deep conversation with a lot of vocabulary that sometimes just
so, definitely. I think English is the language with the most words.
Is it?
Yeah, it has I think how many? I think 70,000 or so. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I do believe you. It's just that I did one surprised.
I found that English has most of them, and I think what is the author? Like Shakespeare
Yeah.
was created words actually
That we are currently using, or that they're
I think it's they are niche terms.
Okay,
Yes,
I would say so.
I didn't know any of them,
Okay.
but still, like, he had a record that he contributed a lot to the language, and they're adding, I think, every year like about 5,000 something.
5,000.
Yeah.
Wow. But these are new words because new things like computer, or microchip, so stuff like that. That I didn't know that was that much.
Yeah.
Wow.
Maybe let me double check. Maybe I confuse already also the numbers, but I think it was something like this that they were adding every year. Yeah.
Well, and you're trying to hold up, like keep up with that. And you're like, oh.
Okay, so it's English. Yeah.
Definitely.
I would disagree actually, like with the one that is easiest for you, but I think I'm like I'm definitely a bit of a like how do you call it, like I have a French fetish, like
francophile.
Yeah, I'm francophile. Yeah, my dad was recently using the word francophile, but he wanted to say francophone.
Okay.
And I was saying, I don't think that this word exists, and he was like, no, this is the word for French speakers.
Oh, really?
And I was like, not sure. I think you're confusing too, but maybe I'm just francophile.
Yes, maybe you
maybe
are.
He was talking about me all the time.
Because like he knew something.
He knew. Yeah. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for inviting me. This is
yes.
Unexpected, but I really loved it.
Yeah.
And
me too.
There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
And I can really tell that you are super interested in that topic.